The next chapter is called A Voice in the Night. Soon the boys were in the woods, which were unbelievably dark. They rode between the two cemeteries. Rusty remarked, "You know, Hunter, I never noticed it in the daytime, but these grave sites are kind of weird shapes, kind of spooky." Where the trees met overhead, it was so dark they could barely see the road. They got off their bikes and walked them. When they came near the Harrisville crossroad, a strange sound came to their cars, halfway to their ears, halfway between a cry of pain and a grunt. They stopped, puzzled and tense, straining to identify it. Ahead, they saw a shadowy shape in the road. Motioning Rusty to stay where he was, Hunter moved forward, every sense alert. In a minute, he could see that the shape was short and thick like a bear. It was uttering weird and husky noises. A chill ran up his spine. Was it an animal? Was it a man? He inched closer until a mixture of smells reached his nose. It was the smell of tobacco and alcohol. At the same time, he began to make out words, a familiar voice. Hunter's heart sank, but he beckoned to Rusty. "It's okay," he said in a whisper. It's my dad." Tim Martineau stared at the boys. "I was going to the cabin to find you, Hunter." "What's the matter, Dad?" Hunter asked. It was like a knife in the boy's heart to have Rusty see his father like this. Tim swallowed hard. "It's my leg," Tim complained. "There's a storm coming, and sometimes my leg hurts really bad. I quit early, and I know I can't do any work tomorrow." Hunter understood. This had happened many times before. Bad weather made his father's old injury very painful, and his dad went to drinking for relief. "I'm going to lose my job. You got to live with us and help me," his dad muttered. His voice faded while Hunter was thinking what he should do. Setting his kickstand, he went to his dad and placed his hands on his shoulder, turned his father toward the village, and said, "I'll help you all I can, Dad, but I have to live in the cabin. You should go home now. Bella will give you some coffee, and that will make you feel better." Tim started to go. Then something seemed to penetrate the fog in his mind. He straightened himself. He thrust his shaggy head close to Hunter's face as his words came out. "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? And what are you doing out here at midnight? Who's that boy with you? What trouble have you been up to?" Hunter's stomach churned in anger. "It's all right, Dad," he answered. "All right? It's all wrong. You're my son. You need to come live where I can keep an eye on you." "Look, Dad," Hunter said, "this is my friend Rusty. His dad took us to the movies tonight, and now he's coming back to spend the night with me." In a minute or two, Tim quieted down again, and he shuffled off toward the village, his limp more noticeable than usual. The boys went on their way without a word until Rusty heard a far-off sound. "Is that a dog barking?" he asked. "No, that's a great horned owl." He tipped his head back, cupped his hands over his mouth, and sent out a call. "Hoo, hoo!" Before long, there was an answer, nearer this time. "Hoo, hoo, hoo!" "Man, oh man," Rusty whispered, "your call was so real it fooled the owl." When they reached the cabin, Hunter got milk and cookies. By the light of the lamp, the boys talked before going to bed. Hunter was glad that Rusty didn't say anything about what had happened on the crossroad. He told Rusty to spread out his sleeping bag on the chief's bed. After blowing out the lamp, he went to his bunk in the other room. Hours later, the wail of a siren right outside his cabin woke him up. Hunter sat up with a jerk. "A fire siren? Here? He must be dreaming." "What is that?" Rusty called. Hunter switched on the light, opened the front door, and looked out. The noise had died away. There was nothing to be seen. Of course not. Hunter closed the door and perched on Grandfather's bed. He and Rusty just stared at each other. A fire engine? Yep, they had both heard it. "This is more kooky than I bargained for," Rusty said with a whisper. While they were still dazed, a voice reached them through the back window, which was open. "Hey, listen to me. Listen and obey, my son." Hunter gripped Rusty's arm like a vice. "It's Grandfather," he breathed. "Listen to me, Hunter," the voice of the old man went on. "You must leave the cabin and live with your people. Hunter, obey me." The boys waited. The big Ben on the shelf ticked loudly. There was no other sound indoors or out. Finally, Hunter picked up a flashlight. "Come on, Rusty, let's take a look outside." Sticking close together, the boys circled the house, shining the light in every direction. They looked behind the woodpile and behind the trees, even in the branches, but there was no one there. Thunder grumbled in the distance and lightning flashed, adding to the weirdness of the hour. When they finally went in, Rusty asked in a voice full, "Did that really sound like the old chief?" "It was Grandfather's voice," Hunter said. "No doubt about it, but what?" "Well, one thing puzzles me." "What is it?" "Well," Hunter answered slowly, "most of the time Grandfather called me son, but when he wanted to impress something on me, he used the name that was given to me in my name ceremony." In a whisper, Rusty asked, "What name is that?" "My grandfather called me Mighty Hunter." Rusty's mouth opened, but he said nothing. Hunter went on, thinking out loud. If Grandfather really wanted me to pay attention, he would have said Mighty Hunter. I'm sure of it. The boys talked in quiet voices for quite a while, about the siren and that voice. They could not explain those mysteries no matter how hard they tried. "I'm glad you're here too. I heard it too," Hunter said. "Otherwise I would have thought I dreamed it." Then the storm struck. Rain poured down in a flood. Lightning made the boys blink and thunder shook their cabin. "Wow," Hunter said when he could make himself heard. "This is going to wash away any signs I might have seen outdoors in the morning." He was right. Even in the bright sunshine of a fresh, beautiful day, he could not find a single clue that anyone or anything had been near the cabin in the night. "I just don't know what to do," Hunter said. "If Grandfather told me to live with Dad, I would move. But I don't feel like it's me to spend time in the village. He was afraid I would lose my Indian ways like Dad." Later, he said, "Rusty, you told me you did a project on Indians at school. Did you ever come across the idea of a guiding dream?" "Yeah, I don't remember much about it, but why?" "Do you think a guiding dream might help me make a decision about moving?" "That's a cool idea. How do you do that?" "Well, first you have to go without any food for at least one day. Then you go off by yourself, pick a place, and sleep. Your dream tells you what to do. Or you see something that points the right way. I sure need help. Where to live, how to return the binoc—" He stopped himself before finishing. Rusty was excited. "You haven't had breakfast yet. You could fast today, and then the dream could be tomorrow." "But I'm supposed to look after you," Hunter said. "Oh, nuts," the redhead said. "I can look after myself. I need to get souvenirs for my mom and my sister." "A dream could take all day," Hunter warned. "No problem," Rusty grinned. "In the afternoon, I will take Jancy sketching." "Do you know how and where to have your dream?" "Well," came the answer, "old-time Indians believed their totem would show them the right place. My totem is the owl, but I don't know—" "Hey," Rusty interrupted, "speaking of owls, where is your owl headdress you told me about? So much happened last night, I forgot to ask you about all your treasures. Where are they?" Hunter answered him, "Well, after the window was smashed, I hid them. So if you can find them, see if you can find them. While you're doing that, I'll make your breakfast and fix sandwiches for lunch. I just won't eat." Hunter enjoyed the next 20 minutes. He watched Rusty search high and low in the beds and under the dressers. He even looked in the potbelly stove and outside under the porch. At last, he finally said, "I think you buried them." "Well, sort of," Hunter admitted. "If you swear not to tell a soul, I'll show you." Rusty crossed his heart. Out of the wood box came the wood. Then Hunter lifted out the odd, bulky bundles. Rusty brought a chair over and sat with his arms resting on his back. His face was glowing with interest. Hunter laid the feathered headdress on the bed. Shaking his head in amazement, Rusty said, "I have seen an eagle headdress in a museum, but never one like this. How come it's made like an owl?" "I told you," Hunter answered. "My family belongs to the Owl clan." "I didn't know Indians had clans as well as tribes," Rusty said. "Sure, the Ottawas had lots of clans, named for a wild creature that was on their totem. Pontiac's was the otter. He signed his birch bark messages with an otter's paw mark." Rusty's eyes were round with wonder. "How come you know things like this?" he asked. "Grandfather told me," Hunter said. He paused. "You see, Pontiac was a far-off grandfather of mine." Rusty stared. "Wow." Then he remarked, "You said Pontiac's totem was the otter. How come yours is an owl?" Hunter explained that he was related to one of Pontiac's granddaughters who married a man in the Owl clan. Ottawa families always took the totem of the father. Rusty made Hunter wear the headdress while he unwrapped the rest of the artifacts. The mainland boy was fascinated with each item and pumped his friend for all the information he could get. The morning was almost done when at last they got the priceless objects put away. Hunter said the next thing to do was to check out some empty buildings he had remembered last night before going to sleep. It was property called Silver Birches on the East Shore Boulevard, a little beyond Pine Point. Rusty loaded his things on his bike and the boys set out. They passed the Witzerichs' house and soon were at Silver Birches. It was a kind of a camp. There were 2 cottages and a dorm-like building, all unused for years. They were handy to the road and would have been a good place for stolen bikes. The boys looked through every window they could reach, but came up empty-handed. It was lunchtime when they went down beside the lake. While Rusty ate his sandwiches, Hunter skipped rocks, trying to convince himself he wasn't hungry. When Rusty had finished, he said to Hunter, "I'd like to know more about Pontiac. Could I get a book from the library?" "Sure," said Hunter. "Let's go there now." Mrs. Purcell was glad to help them. She picked out the best book on the Great Chief and signed it out on Hunter's card. Back again on the street, they saw Kirby, who was collecting trash. He put a friendly hand on Hunter's shoulder. "Say, you don't look so good. Something bothering you?" Hunter thought about his empty stomach, the sirens, the voice he heard in the night, but still shook his head no. "Are you about ready to leave the cabin?" the trash man said. "No," said Hunter. "I haven't made up my mind yet." "Well, let me know when you do," Kirby reassured him. "I'm ready to help you, even if we're competing for the rewards. You might decide to move sooner than you think." Kirby drove down the street. When he was out of hearing, Rusty said, "What did he mean by that?" "I don't have a clue," Hunter answered. Any thoughts on who the thief might be?